the things you don't want to take for granted. In one sense, it's precisely the same things as they are in doing ministry in the countryside, in Little Piddle in the Whittle, as most of our villages are called, that sort of thing. It's the same thing. You pray, because unless the Lord's at work, you're stuffed, and you teach the Bible. I mean, but that's not what you're asking me. But I would want to say you got to have those. They're absolutely non-negotiables. What is different in the city? You often only get one chance. So if you're the village church, people will come in and probably once a year to something or a funeral, and they'll keep coming back. There are lots of churches in the city, and when people come, you may only have one opportunity. That's just different. It means you need to, I think, be pretty careful about how things run at the front. You can't just let anyone have a go. In a way, again, if it's even a stable suburban congregation, you can let little Billy, age 16, preach a little sermonette one week, and everyone goes, "Oh, that's nice." We love Billy. We've seen him grow up since a little kid. There are different groups at church, of course. The outsider, the non-Christian who comes in, is probably going to find little Billy, painful. And there is something inclusive about excellence. And in the city centre, people are used to excellent music and lectures and theatre. So to be wildly different from that is odd. But at the same time, you can't just be too slick, because then there is nothing different about church. So we try hard to do all things well, but we smile when they go badly and don't, fall on our swords. I think, and trying to encourage that culture, it's quite hard to get that right. So try to sit down and prayerfully work out what drives you. So I wrote this book for secular guys, really, in our congregation, some of whom central London easily doing 80 plus hours a week. I'm thinking through hard, Matthew 11, 28 to 30, come to me all who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest for your soul. The striking thing there, I think I realised the two terms Jesus uses, weary and burdened. Weary is present active verb, things we do. Burdened is passive. So we weary ourselves because we have burdens upon us. Jesus will say later on in chapter 24, the main burden is a yoke of law that the Pharisees put on. But there are, and don't be justified by your works, but there are secular cousins of that burden. So the most common ones in London, and therefore church ministers are as prone to them as laymen would be. You've got to prove yourself. That's a big burden. That's a really big burden. Just before coming out, I watched a documentary, because I'm really very cultured. It was about the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra. Oh yes, and they were touring China. It's the first time they'd toured China. Simon Rattle conducting. So 128, is that right? Members of the orchestra. 3 trialists there for the first time. So they're really stressed. Am I going to be good enough to get into the best orchestra in the world? Which it probably is. Isn't it? Not British, so it's not an anti-Aussie thing. It's not cricket, we're not talking about that now. But the thing that was striking was every single member of the orchestra they interviewed was stressed. Am I still good enough? I seem to have taken a little bit longer than normal to learn this piece. My bow work was off. Did anyone else notice? And the pressure to be in that environment made them all absolutely miserable and catty. That's a burden, to prove yourself. The other dominant ones, I think, in London, control. If I can just earn enough money, if I just got enough money in the bank, I'm safe. And then if I get the sack, it doesn't matter. If I can just get my children into this school, I've secured their future. And that's a burden, to think I can control, if I can. And in church planting, that's the big one, isn't it? Perhaps even more than the proving yourself. They go hand in hand. But if I can just get to 35, 40, would be financially viable. If we get that building, everything will be sorted out. And of course, the answer to all these things, you have got to trust the Lord. Now that's easy, isn't it? It's a trite thing to say, but that's where most of us spend our lives learning to do a little bit better. But the difference between waking up each morning and anxious toil, stressfully thinking the success of this project is mine and mine alone, and trusting work, I'm going to go hard today, but trust the Lord for the outcome. There's a world of difference between those two, and I don't live in the latter all the time. You flip between them. What makes the difference? You've got to spend time with Jesus. It's not complicated. Here's the magic bullet. You spend time with the Lord and remember He's in charge. He's very good. If the church goes belly up, He still loves you. You'll still be with Him in eternity. Sometimes it does take things to go wrong for you to believe those things deeply. Sometimes. But time with Him, you can't cut that. You can't cut that. That's the one thing that is needed. Keeps you sane.